Good evening. I'm Tom Conrad, the Superintendent of Schools for the Nauset District, and welcome to Superintendent Spotlight, a half-hour show dedicated to learning more about the people who work in central office and the programs that we work with. Tonight's guest is our Assistant Superintendent, Keith Gawley. So Keith, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Tom.
And we hope to spend a half hour or so talking about some of the things that Keith's involved with. So Keith, why don't we get right into it and talk about your background and give us a little idea of where you came from and what you've been doing.
Sure. I think I'm always a believer that you need to understand the person as well as the professional piece. So my wife and I, Deb, have two boys, Ben, who's 25, and Ryan, who's 22. Ben currently works for World Learning. Actually just got a job yesterday in DC.
Congratulations, Ben. Good job.
Yeah, so excited about that in the family and keeping education in the family. On a professional level, I have been in 3 districts. I started out in Abington. Primarily there as a grade 5 teacher, although I became a principal of the school that I was teaching at, which was interesting.
Very nice.
The good part with that is you kind of knew what you needed to address going in, so we addressed those pieces, had a very successful 10 years in Abington. Then, interestingly enough, they were looking to close one of the schools in Abington, and I was the last person in, so I said, okay, better put my resume together. Wound up heading over to Deer Hill School in Cohasset. Worked in Cohasset for 6 years. And then Margie Wallace, to her credit, who I've known for years, said, hey, Keith, there's an opening down in Brewster. So came down to Brewster and was principal at the Eddy School for 6 years before jumping over to central office.
Did you know the Cape before you came?
We had spent, Deb and I had spent quite a few years on the Cape, mostly at the sea camps. She had been down here quite a bit as a child, and then we worked at the sea camps, and she's still working there. I spent 15 years there.
Wow. So you got a pretty good idea of what's going on.
It was a very comfortable place.
Nice. And so how long have you been at the central office, Keith?
Let's see, this is going into my 3rd year
Wow.
as assistant superintendent.
Time flies.
Yes, it really does.
So we're going to try and give the viewers some idea of what do you get involved with. And I thought a huge area for us, of course, is curriculum and instruction. And that means lots of things.
Yeah.
So if you want to kind of give the viewers some idea of what you're working on and,
Sure.
how you get around to work with the other teachers and things like that.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
right, because one of the primary roles of the assistant superintendent is really articulating, coordinating, implementing curriculum and instruction. And we're, obviously, as the viewers know, in a very unique district where you have 4 elementary schools, well, 5 elementary schools in 4 of their own towns.
Right.
So those are their own districts, and then you jump to the regional level for the middle school and high school. So one of the primary pieces early on was really just taking that coordination at the elementary level. We spent the first year really being successful in terms of jumping with our reading program, our English Language Arts program at the elementary level, had some resources available, and for the first time in quite a few years, actually have the same resource that we're using throughout the elementary schools to provide a nice foundation. The same is true in terms of math right now. So all of the elementary schools are using the same math curriculum, using some of the same resources. So we feel really good about the coordination that's happened there in terms of preparing students for the middle school. At the middle school and high school level, it's obviously a different animal that you're dealing with. I came into the district with obviously a very strong middle school, a very strong high school. So on those levels, you're looking at the program of studies, you're looking at where can we tweak some elements. As you know, we are now looking at the IB diploma program for Nauset Regional High School, and that's just one of those areas that you're excited to pursue, and just excited for the opportunities for students. So that's just a quick overview in terms of curriculum.
For our viewers to understand, Keith's challenge, of course, in the elementaries is that each of the communities have their own school committees. And so Brewster, Orleans, Eastham, and Wellfleet represent 4 different school committees. And the challenge is how to pull everybody together.
Yeah.
And for many years, that was a struggle for us, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what was happening, the irony or the story behind the story, is in Brewster we were actually pursuing a new reading program at that point in time. And they were pointing us to the ones that Orleans was using. Come to find out, there was actually a newer program out there that they weren't encouraging at that point because they needed to get rid of the published materials from 2011. So having done our research, we then discovered the Reading Wonders program for the elementary level. And just with a kind of combination of operating budget through the towns plus substantial money from our Title I grant for materials for interventions in struggling students, we were able to purchase all of the materials at the same time for the elementary schools. So that was huge.
Is this the first time that we've seen that sort of consistency?
Oh, it's actually a good question, and you have more history in the district than I do. So it's the first time since I've been here. Whether or not, it goes back 15, 20, 25 years, I'm not sure what had happened if they were able to achieve that 25 years ago.
Yeah, I know that it's always been a goal, and having been here over 20 years now, but it struggled when it got to the local level.
Yeah.
And having a variety of different reading programs or math programs has led to some inconsistencies for the region in terms of what they were seeing for kids coming forward.
Absolutely.
And so now, if I understand it right, and the Wonders program is for all 4 schools to use,
Yeah.
and the Engage New York Math Series is likewise.
Right, and what we have to do, of course, with those is because a lot of times national materials, national programs are based upon the Common Core standards. What a lot of the public doesn't know is the Common Core standards are actually really derived from Massachusetts standards and added on to from there, but Massachusetts still has some additional standards that are not in the Common Core. So when we go through these programs, when we look at our curriculum from the global perspective, we actually need to bring in some additional pieces. One example would be poetry. So poetry is not in the Common Core standards, but it is in Massachusetts standards. So we have writing folders that we've implemented at the elementary level, and we have additional reading materials specifically for poetry to address those standards.
So I know, because I've sat in on some of your meetings and even some of your workshops, you're heavily involved in guiding this through in each of our schools.
Yeah, and again, we have 2 coordinators right now, K-5 coordinators for the first time. That happened 2 years ago. Lorraine Johnson is our ELA coordinator, and Tracy Deegan's our math coordinator. And Tracy, to her credit, she's been doing a remarkable job with professional development for staff. She has taken the lead in terms of guiding grade level teams through the materials, looking at the assessments, updating the assessments. And we've also put an emphasis back on fact fluency. One of the pieces that we heard from the middle school is you just have too many students coming up that don't have a good enough handle on number sense. Number sense meaning, what are combinations of 10 quickly off the top of their head. And because they didn't have that really foundation in number sense, we've gone back and we've implemented fact fluency tests at all of the elementary grade levels as well. And not so much in terms of the need for students to be able to do math facts quickly, but automaticity is obviously important, and having that foundation to higher problem solving skills.
Sure.
So we have that in place now, and we're actually getting scores from all of the classrooms on a unit basis, so about every 5-6 weeks. And we can look at those scores and then make adjustments and provide interventions to students as well.
Yeah, that's a key point, isn't it? Yeah. And we live in a time now when there's a great deal of concern about the testing that's taking place, both within our system and at the state level and so forth. But that's a key shift for us in terms of using that data to help kids, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, is so many people at this point in time really can look at testing as a negative. I think NASIT's always done a very good job in terms of having the balance. Is we understand student achievement is our primary responsibility. Student growth is our primary responsibility. We've always done well balancing assessments. More or less, we look at it as, if you are teaching students the essential skills, standards, concepts that they need to know, and if you're really working with students to get to know the students will perform up to their performance level at that particular time. But the other part that's beautiful about NASIT is we take a growth mindset towards kids, which is, you had a great example at the high school. Those students that wanted to take AP classes, they could take AP classes. It wasn't a teacher's recommendation, it's really the student and the parent involved in the process.
Sure.
And we want to be doing the same thing at the elementary level, which is say there's a student who's struggling with reading fluency or reading comprehension at grade 2. What can we be doing for that student to keep the student engaged in school, interested in reading, key point, because if we lose that interest, then we've done nothing right for that student, and help that student along. So we have a NOSIT tiered system of support. Complicated way of basically saying, you know, if Tom needed more hair, then we've got the right intervention for that.
Easy.
And it's really targeted to the individual student. So a student that needs more work on reading fluency, they will be practicing reading fluency on a daily basis. A student that needs more work in math, they'll be practicing math and problem solving on a daily basis. And we've seen wonderful results through those interventions.
Math and English is a huge focus for us in the elementaries.
Yeah.
And we know that aligns with what the state is looking for, and what's in the best interest of our students' future. And that intervention is critical, that students don't fall through the cracks. So we're going to shift, okay? So we're talking a little bit about the big picture of curriculum and instruction. We're going to head into what we know in this business as the DDMs. And that's an interesting piece that has some impact, obviously, on student learning and so forth, but also involves our teachers, doesn't it? So let's talk a little bit about the broad descriptor of DDMs.
So DDMs stand for District Determined Measures. And District Determined Measures are basically assessments that are looking at student achievement and student growth. So again, depending upon the twist on it, we're looking at it as very much a positive, which is if you have assessments in place that are looking at what do the students come in knowing, what gains are they making during the year, and then what is sticking with them long term, and I think that long-term retention and application is a key point. But the DDMs are really designed to measure student growth over the course of a year, or if it's a half-year course, a 2-semester course, over the course of that length of time. So, in fact, I've got 2 meetings immediately after this with teachers around DDMs, and we're looking at what are the essential skills and standards in that particular course. One of them happens to be Mrs. McCulley with videography. So the video course that students take, we're looking at what are the skills that they need to know, what do they come in knowing, and then she has a nice portfolio system set up that will measure students' growth throughout the course of the year. And DDMs apply to every educator. It's actually part of the educator evaluation system that's designed to look at an educator's impact on student learning and growth. And DDMs are a part of that.
The interesting piece, of course, is that in many cases, it's not additional testing that we're giving students, is it?
No, and I think that's the point, is one of the key pieces of information that I'm trying to share with teachers in the meetings is we need to make sure that the assessments are something they'd want to be using anyway, to look at student learning and student growth, and yet that they're designed so well that we actually have some information that we can break down and look at subsets of skills. So as long as the educators are approaching that task with how can I design an assessment that's really information I want to have, and we need to get students involved in the process. One of the big pieces that we came out of our professional development on assessment over the summer is that too often students are seeing it as kind of an outside piece. I'm not really part of the assessment process, so we want students involved in the process looking at what are the areas that are strengths right now, what are the areas that are weaknesses that they can grow in, and tracking their own growth. If students have the buy-in, we know that there's going to be more student learning and more student growth.
The critical piece, and you talked about this earlier, Keith, really is what do we do with the information?
Yes.
And what adjustments are our teachers making, or what assistance do we offer students to pick up those skills? And that's a challenge for the system and for everyone, right?
A huge challenge is I'm actually, as I meet with groups of teachers, I'm actually creating individualized score sheets to do a lot of the calculations for us. So I'll just give one example. It was a grade 6 history DDM. Is they have some essential elements. It's just the simple things: location of countries, bodies of waters, mountain ranges, and that even though we know a student can look that up now in an instant, there's still an element that you need to understand where those pieces are, where countries are located off the top of your head without going to your phone or going to your iPad, so that they have a better sense in the moment of what that means and how that would impact others around the world and other countries nearby. So we broke it down into some of the elements that are just a remembering piece. Then we have the longer element of their DDM, which is really how do these features impact the country's government, their country's economy, the culture in that country. So that becomes broken down on the DDM into two separate pieces, and you can look and analyze those separate pieces.
The interesting piece, particularly at the region, was so many students coming in from outside the region, and as you know, it's close to 300 students at the high school alone, and the middle school has a high percentage of their students coming in either choice or the tuition program. That assessing at the very beginning is really important to set the bar for what do the students bring in for prior knowledge. And then from there, of course, I think the critical piece is the teacher having the time to analyze that data and make the shifts that we want.
And I think that's the piece that we still need to get better at. We emphasize a school year right now that maximizes time on learning for students. We want as much contact time between teachers and students as possible. Unfortunately, that can be at the expense of time for teachers to collaborate, time for teachers to sit down and look at the data. So we've done some of that during our 2 professional development days this year. We've done some of it during our 2 in-service days thus far this year. But we need to have a better system in place that really has the time for teachers to do that incrementally throughout the year and to make adjustments.
It's interesting of the concept of the flex day.
Yes.
And I know that you were heavily involved in that in the last negotiations. And I want to talk a little bit about what the concept is. And we're at the beginning stages of it, but the thinking behind the teachers having a flex day.
Sure, and what Tom's referencing is he's referencing our flexible professional development day. So we have in our contract right now 2 professional development days with a 3rd flexible PD day. That flexible PD day is really designed to allow educators the opportunity to pursue something professional growth-wise that fits their unique needs. One example would be the History and Social Science Conference, National Conference that was in Boston. That date didn't fall on one of our PD days. So the history and social science teachers could take advantage of that flexible professional development day, go to that conference. And we were able to achieve that, excuse me, by adding in a day to the student year. So it's not really a day that the teachers are out of the classroom at students' expense.
Right.
We added the day into the student year. One of the pieces that research always shows is professional development that's a one-hit piece isn't effective. You know, we can provide training on teachers regarding, say, our Aspen computer program, and that's training. But professional development really needs to be, here are some pieces to possibly try, give teachers time to do that, touch base with them again, talk about it, give teachers time to refine it, touch base with them again. So one of the pieces we're actually looking forward to, and we were actually just talking about yesterday, was a professional development flex day that is broken up throughout the year. For instance, you know, 2 hours in September, 2 hours in November, 2 hours in January, and that could be after school. It doesn't have to be during the school day, so you aren't pulling, again, teachers from the classroom. But you've set up a model that really fits what research says is the best model for professional development.
Sure. And that's a whole area for you as well. I mean, this whole professional development piece. Talk a little bit about that.
So as I said, and as you know, we have 2 full days for staff during the year. Our first full day is oftentimes the day before school gets going, and we had 27 offerings on September 3rd this year. We had recently 17 offerings in district and another 26 offerings out of district for our October 9th Professional Development Day. For me, the challenge is always, how do we meet the individual needs of educators and give them something that's worthwhile in their daily lives, in their daily profession? So we have our nurse group, just as an example, that had 2 programs from Boston Children's Hospital. And those are always well received, get fantastic feedback and evaluations. We at the same time had 2 Google trainers in, one doing Google Classroom, one doing Google Apps on the iPad. Both of those workshops were wonderful. But that's meeting some of the needs. What do we do for the physical education teachers? What do we do for the educational assistants? So it's always kind of a piece of the puzzle, getting all of those pieces together. And then our professional development committee, it's a committee of about 30 educators from all areas of the school system, really lead that charge. And we're going to be getting together in the next 2 months following these PD days, look at the results, say what do we need to change for next year, and then make the adjustments to really meet people's needs as much as we can.
And that's your baby, right? I mean, this is professional development is in your watch, right?
Yeah, I was in at 5:15 on the September 3rd day. And it was a good thing I was in at 5:15 because I was just about ready by the time the workshop started at 8 a.m. that day. So.
But you know, the interesting piece is that as you lay this out for our residents to hear, you work on this all year. Right. You've got the committee in place and hopefully representing the needs of the different groups of people that work for us. And you know, that nursing project that you described to the viewers, I think it's for 7 or 8 people. I mean, that's how fun, you know, how we try to zero in on all the needs of everyone. And we have hundreds of people that you're planning for.
Yeah. So total, as you know, 520 employees in the district. Out of the 520, about 410, counting the educational assistants, have professional development. And then about 315 or so of those are classroom teachers and specialist teachers.
Sure. And there's a whole system of documenting what people are taking.
Yeah.
And you might want to tell the viewers about that in terms of some improvements we've made in
so
that area.
Obviously one of the challenges for anyone is to keep up with technology, whether it be in the classroom or whether it be what teachers are using. So we have a Smart EDU system, and that Smart EDU system not only allows folks to register for the various professional development, tracks their PDPs, or professional development points, and we've just actually upgraded that system to include teachers that can get course approval. So college courses, they can get course approval right there. And as they finish the courses, it automatically counts their credits and adds credits into their system in terms of what they've accomplished beyond a bachelor's or master's degree.
Sure.
So it's been a wonderful addition to the system, and it actually saves other departments, such as our Human Resources Department, from doing all of that with paper and pencil.
What the viewers don't know is it wasn't all that long ago. It was all done on paper.
Not that long ago at all.
So that's been a big shift, and it's helped you obviously, but it's helped our teachers to keep track of what's going on. We have a lot of younger teachers who are working on their master's degree, for instance, and it's streamlined the whole operation for us. We hear so much about data in general, and I'm sure it's hard for a lot of viewers to understand, you know, why, you know, what's changed with data and how we use it. And so you want to talk a little, it's a broad topic, obviously.
I think what we are trying to do in the system is look at data both at the teacher level, the student level, and quite frankly, even at the parent level. I'll start actually with the parent level. So we know the poor parents, including ourselves, need to be filling out 9 pages of paper at the beginning of every year with student registration information. So as we're filling out that student registration forms, we're saying there's got to be a better way. So as part of our, again, Aspen system, we're going to be looking at making all of that online registration for parents so that every year you won't be filling out 9 pieces of paper for every child. You can simply log in online and say, okay, what needs to be updated? If I take that data to the teacher level, teachers need access to the information. They need access to medical information, health information. They need access to test scores, how the student did in terms of grades. So part of the trick is getting that access so that it's immediate. They can find what they need in a brief period of time to support the students. And then that student data piece really becomes, okay, Tom Conrad's a 3rd grade student. How did Tom do in 3rd grade? Tom might have been on 504 in 3rd grade. He broke his arm and needed accommodations. now we know Tom has a broken arm. So that then might have impacted what he did for grades, because Tom couldn't write in 3rd grade. So he goes on and takes the MCAS with a broken arm, doesn't do as well. We need access to both those data points. Look at that compared to 4th grade. How did Tom do in the classroom with his grades? How did he do on MCAS? And it's really breaking down, again, that data into subsets of skills so that we know what it is that we need to be providing additional support for the student. And managing that system, as you can imagine, with 2,500 students.
And what the viewers have no idea about is now the connection with the state, with our data.
Yes.
And it's just become a massive effort for us. You want to talk a little bit about some, just touch base on a little bit on that.
Yeah, there are actually many good things with that. So there's everything from SIMS, which is Student Information Management System, to EPIMS, which is Educator Management System. All of that data about students, and I believe it's currently around 66 fields for every single student, gets uploaded
Let's
to the
just stop
state.
that for a second. So make sure the viewers understand that there are 66 areas that we're reporting to in terms of each student in our system to the state on a yearly basis, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it also links that student with courses and teachers. Now the great part of that, if I switch just for a brief second, allows us to do things such as improve our safety and security program. So we'll be rolling out in the district a new security app called Crisis Go, and that'll be in the next few months. And because we have all of that data that's required, we can take all of that data, transfer it into the security app, and then be able to notify parents, notify students, notify teachers in an instant if there's any security information that they need to know, whether it be a drill, a lockdown drill, or whether it be something that's actually a real event, a gas line leak outside the school. We can notify parents and teachers exactly what's happening. So
Sure.
that's the nice part of that.
The piece of it is, of course, from a central office standpoint in general, that someone has to stay on top of all of this. And that's been a challenge for us in the system. I mean, at the building level, at the central office level, and so forth. And I think one of the key pieces is again, the state understanding that for lots of good reasons of doing this, that there is a burden sometimes on the district in terms of its manpower to get these projects done in a timely fashion, certainly.
And you can, again, you can think of it on a small level, because fortunately we have smaller elementary schools, 200 student elementary schools, but even there you have a secretary that's entering every student into each course that student's taking, matching up that course with teachers, matching up the courses across the entire school, and then you bring that to the high school level with 1,000 students. And what that requires just on a secretarial end. And that doesn't count anything that Barbara Lavoine, our technology director, does in terms of organizing all of that data for the state.
Yeah, and we've actually been talking about having some data people in the buildings, specifically working to help provide some good information for teachers. How is that going?
Yeah, so we have data subject coordinators right now. We tried out this program last year with Karen O'Connor, Mrs. O'Connor at the Eastham Elementary School. And Karen actually came out of that with wonderful suggestions, which is how do we take the information and provide some consistency, particularly with our assessments, across grade levels so that it becomes more relevant information. So because of the success that we had with Karen's really pilot of this, we're looking at establishing data subject coordinators in each building to have a building level data analysis and have that ongoing process looking at students.
Well, Keith, I hate to tell you this, but we are close to finishing for the day.
I only covered 3 of my 10
I know,
topics, Tom.
it looks like this is just part 1 of a series on Keith Gawley and his responsibilities. But obviously, you're a very, very busy man for us and working very hard and doing some great things, Keith. And we'll get you back on. And I hope our viewers have learned a little bit about some of the things that you're doing for us and you're doing for our teachers and our students going forward. So thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
To our viewers, thanks again. And remember, this is a brand new show for us, trying to give you some insight into what's happening at Central Office and some of the responsibilities of the people that work there. And as you can see, Keith Gawley's doing a great job for this district and some of the areas that he's really focused on. So thank you and good night.